Hey everyone, we are continuing on with the next chapter of Halloween Vibes, a Halloween novella in the Eternal Rest Bed and Breakfast Paranormal Cozy Mysteries. So let's go. Chapter 3. Emily turned away from the scene in front of her and made a noise of disgust. Then she laughed self-consciously. I know it's just pumpkin guts, but someone did this with intention, Sage finished for her. She sounded equally disgusted, like they had murder on their mind. Emily faced the pumpkins again, her flashlight beam illuminating the whole scene. Now that the initial shock had worn off, it didn't seem quite as gruesome. Still, though, her stomach twisted in a knot at the sight. Why am I reacting like this? They're just pumpkins. Even as she asked herself that question, Emily knew the answer. For one thing, someone had snuck onto her property and ruined Reed's sweet little display. Trespassing and vandalism, all while Emily had been right next door. For another thing, Sage had a good point about the vandal having had murder on their mind. This didn't look like a typical Halloween prank. It had been done by someone who was angry, or maybe a whole group of angry people. If whoever did this was feeling murderous, and you were getting those same kinds of vibes earlier tonight, do you think the two are related? Emily asked. Did the person pacing in front of your office building come out here to get some rage out of their system? Sage gave a half-hearted shrug. The person whose feelings I was tapping into wasn't focused on killing pumpkins, that's for sure. No, I think Reed missed his chance to bust a bunch of teenagers. Poor Reed. He's going to be furious when he finds out about this. Not only is his display wrecked, but he and his team are going to have to clean all this up. I think you should leave it exactly like it is, Sage said, no trace of humor in her voice. I know he wasn't going for a scary Halloween display, but it really works. Well, I'll wait to give him the news tomorrow, Emily said. No point making him lose a night's sleep. I'm guessing he headed home because no one was coming around, and he thought the coast was clear. We were never like this. Sage crossed her arms. I snuck into this cemetery plenty of times as a teenager, but we never wrecked anything. Emily gave her friend a rueful smile. I never tried to sneak in. My grandparents were running Eternal Rest back then, and I was too scared of being caught. She shook her head as she reached out and gingerly touched a pumpkin whose top had been violently lopped off. These kids clearly used a sharp knife. Stupid teenagers. It's bad enough to trespass and vandalize, but someone might have gotten really hurt. Someone did get hurt, Sage said. She pointed at a small pumpkin sitting on top of a hay bale. Look. Emily leaned closer to the pumpkin and shined her flashlight directly at it. Sure enough, there was a small splatter of red on its orange rind. There was some more on another pumpkin nearby. There's no point trying to clean this mess up in the dark, but let's keep looking for those teens. One of them might need stitches. Sage and Emily continued their search at the cemetery, but there was no sign that anyone was there except them and the ghost of Mr. Dawson. Finally, when Emily's watch told her it was nearly 1 o'clock in the morning, the two of them gave up and returned to Eternal Rest. Sorry I've kept you out so late, Emily commented, as she and Sage walked across the grassy stretch between the cemetery gates and the house. You came out here to pass along some news, and I dragged you on a midnight jaunt through the cemetery. Oh, I don't mind, Sage said, then immediately reached up to stifle a yawn. I don't have to get up as early as you do. True, which makes me wonder about something. Emily swung the flashlight towards Sage, inadvertently shining it directly into her eyes. Oh, sorry. You know I normally go to bed a lot earlier than midnight, but you showed up at my door late tonight anyway. How did you know I'd still be awake? Honestly, I didn't, Sage admitted. I just had this feeling that I needed to tell you about the murderous pacer, and I needed to do it immediately. My plan was to call you while I was standing at your front door, and I wasn't going to quit calling until you woke up and let me in. Gee, thanks. I feel like I'm on high alert, Sage said. Something is brewing, Em. Can't you feel it? No, but then I'm not a psychic medium like you are. If there's trouble in the spirit world, then I'm not privy to it. You keep practicing and you'll learn how to feel spiritual energy too. If it makes me lose sleep, I'm not sure I want to learn. Sage had even gone so far as to buy Emily a set of tarot cards, giving her instructions on how to use them as a meditative tool to try to tap into any psychic abilities she might have. As far as Sage was concerned, being a psychic medium was a lot like playing the piano. Everyone had the potential to do it, but few took the time and effort to learn the skill. At the moment, Emily wasn't much interested in giving up the time she could be sleeping to work on communicating with ghosts. Emily wished Sage a good night when they reached the circular drive in front of Eternal Rest. As Sage drove off, her red brake lights the only illumination along the two-lane road that led toward downtown Oak Hill, Emily stood and let the cool night air wash over her. In a few minutes, she felt her mind slowing down, and she hoped nothing else would interrupt her sleep. Getting out of bed in the morning was a struggle, and Emily figured she'd be drinking more coffee than all of her guests combined. She was in the kitchen, sipping on her first cup and arranging a tray of sliced cheeses and deli meats for her guests, when she figured she could no longer put off the inevitable. She had to tell Reed the news. Emily sat down at the round wooden table in one corner of the kitchen, took a deep breath, and called Reed. He took the news better than she had expected, though he did lament the fact that he had given up his watch too early. I had figured they were all done for the night, he said. Next year, I'll get some volunteers to help out, and we can pull an all-night watch. In the meantime, you can... Emily stopped short as her eyes fell on the knife rack sitting on the kitchen counter. Oh no. Emily? Reed sounded instantly worried. One of my knives is missing. The biggest one. Theories about where the knife might have gone began swirling through Emily's mind. Had one of her guests taken it to use during the pumpkin carving party? She had laid out old knives for the occasion, but it was possible someone had gone in search of something sharper. And, maybe, one of her guests had kept the knife, then gone to the cemetery later to do a different kind of pumpkin carving. No, Emily told herself, that's not right. Her guests had gone into town after they had made their jack-o'-lanterns, and they had all returned as a group. It was more likely she had missed the knife during the cleanup on the front lawn, and one of the teenagers who had snuck into the cemetery had found it and used it to vandalize Reed's display. Emily had been silent a long moment, and finally Reed prompted her with a quiet, Em? Don't be surprised if you find my carving knife out in the cemetery somewhere, she said apologetically. I'm guessing one of my guests used it to make their jack-o'-lantern, then forgot it outside where anyone could grab it. It's a theory, Reed said skeptically, but kids who sneak into the cemetery don't usually go traipsing through your yard, Emily. Good point. Whatever the story is, there's no denying that I'm missing a knife. Reed did his best to reassure Emily, and he promised he'd be out at the cemetery before long to inspect the damage. And I'll keep an eye out for your knife, he added. Emily had expected to feel a little better after talking to Reed, but instead she felt unsettled. She got breakfast laid out on the sideboard in the dining room, then went outside to make another sweep of the lawn. Even in the bright morning sun, there was no sign of Emily's missing knife. She wanted to look in the cemetery too, but she also didn't want her guests to come downstairs to find her gone. Reed will look for it, Emily told herself firmly. My guests are my top priority. Emily sat down at the roll-top desk in the parlor, another steaming cup of coffee in her hand. She had just opened her laptop to check online reservation requests when her cell phone rang. Wow, Reed must have hustled to Hilltop, Emily said to herself as she picked up the phone. The caller ID, however, showed it was Trish Alden calling. The owner of Grainy Day Bakery skipped right over any kind of greeting, and her thick southern accent was especially pronounced as she spoke, a sure sign she was wound up. Have you heard about the murder, Emily? Trish boomed. Emily's chest instantly tightened as she thought about Sage's psychic impressions the night before. Tell me, she said breathlessly. Joe Carruthers was found carved like a jack-o'-lantern in the middle of the town square last night. Someone took a giant knife and cut him to pieces. And that is the end of chapter 3, so keep watching for the next chapter and to find out what happens next.